and thanks for tuning in. As always, this is Reverend JR, and today we're going to respond to 5 more questions that atheists cannot answer. The video doesn't put any text and just shows us some pictures, so we're going to use that as my backdrop today. Also, a quick update, I'm going to start working to get a schedule going here so that I can get certain types of videos out on a regular basis. Nothing too ambitious, we'll see how it goes. You can check the link to my page that I just created down in the doobly-doo. Anyway, on with the questions.
Hello, you've reached Christian-apologist.com, and this is S.J. Thomason. And today I'm going to follow up on questions that I've recently asked atheists with more questions.
Although you didn't really ask us the questions, you said they were questions we could not answer. This implies you think they're more like unsolved problems than actual questions you wanted a response about. A minor technicality, but just wanted to point it out.
I have 5 additional questions. The first question is a little long, so...
The first question itself isn't actually that long, though. It's just the premise she needs to build to ask it several times that takes over half this video to establish. Seeing as how this is such a long premise, I'm going to respond to parts of it as well.
Hang on for a second and let me explain. Despite the culture or era, sane humans have the innate sense of what's right and what's wrong.
Every human has a sense of what's right and wrong. This is called morality. Well, I guess there may be some people who do not have a moral code. But even then, a de facto sort of morality is established regarding ethics, which brings me to my point, ethics versus morality. Ethics is what a group of people tends to accept as good versus bad. Morals is what any given individual thinks is right or wrong. With that in mind, please be aware that this lady, much like most average people, does not make a distinction between the two here. I'm not doing this to be pedantic, but rather to establish the baseline that I think she is trying to work from. I want to debate her with her own definitions after all. No straw men here.
And we prefer to do what's right to help our fellow humans.
Some of us prefer to do what's right, sure, some of us don't. This again comes down to how each person has different morality. Most people would agree that harm should generally be avoided, but at the same time most people have no problem living only for themselves or their family and disregarding the rest of humanity. It would be nice if everyone worked together for the benefit of everyone else, but most people don't. Most people work for a paycheck, not because they want to make other people's lives better, but because they want to make their own better. I don't think this is the least bit lacking in sanity. However, the definition you give precludes it, because my paycheck only really helps me, so is therefore neutral at the best, or bad at worst, since I'm using it generally only to help myself and not others. I'm saying, you spent 2 minutes of video getting to question 1, which we'll get to, and you shouldn't have been so simple on your analysis of your premise. Just keep in mind, she thinks every action which does not benefit others is necessarily not good. Framing is important, children.
No matter the major religion, we are all aware of the Golden Rule.
The Golden Rule, the maxim of reciprocity. It was not first from the Bible, though. The first record of it comes from the eloquent peasant regarding the Egyptian goddess Maat. Do to the doer to make him do. We see it in other literature of antiquity, such as in ancient Indian lore. Hence, by making your dharma your main focus, treat others as you treat yourself. Dharma doesn't require a god to maintain Vedic order, though. The ancient Greeks and Romans also had the negative affirmations, such as, avoid doing what you would blame others for doing, and so on. However, let's not forget the other instances of the Golden Rule in the positive, so to speak. Doing unto others as they do unto you. The Code of Hammurabi, for example, in which many of the rules are based on killing those who kill, taking from those who steal, and so on. The Bible even has this too, when taking an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. and so on. I guess what I'm saying is, if all sane humans know what is right, why do the ones with the former rule also tend to include the latter? We don't have time to discuss it all here, but the latter is the basis for most codes of conduct, most codes of law, conduct on a larger level, and most people would also not find it objectionable to punish those who punish, though many would not advocate for equivalent punishment anymore. Even the people who think harsh punishments should be applied to themselves, in the general case, for violating rules, they can find even exemptions in many cases for the average person. If you accidentally cause someone to die, for example, most people anymore would not say that you should also die, even though that's the corollary to the Golden Rule, found in all those old texts, including the Bible. You can even see this when Jesus curses the fig tree. For example, when he causes it to die because it does not give life.
We prefer the humble over the braggarts, the selfless over the selfish, and the truthful over the liars.
Not all sane people prefer that, though. Some people like to watch performers who know that they are good, and build entire careers on the premise. I agree that many people find it noble to sacrifice oneself for the greater good, but when we also, find it noble when other people protect their own interests when it is logical to do so. Most people think that if you work hard and earn a nicer thing than your neighbor, this is virtuous, even though it flies in the face of this idea. Lying is a special case, in a way. None of us has much of a problem with actors portraying a character they are not, for example. Some people who deny atrocities do so because they think it's impossible for such bad things to happen, and will accept the lie that it didn't because it's more comforting. Let's not dwell on such a dark subject, though. Lying can sometimes be virtuous, though the general case is correct. If you have to lie to protect yourself, for example, I don't think this is necessarily immoral.
Cross-cultural scholars, such as Gert Hofstede, Fons Trompenaars, Robert House, and Shalom Schwartz, have found that societies vary in ways inconsistent with our innate morality.
That's because, as we pointed out earlier, societies are constructed on ethics which are not necessarily based on morality. Ethics tend to be based on principles of least harm, but morals can be based on entirely different concepts. This is where the idea of the orange-blue morality comes into play. Ethics helps us find good standards of living, despite what some individuals might do or think. It's not a perfect system, this is true.
For example, not all societies are considered collective or cooperative. Collective societies are in Asia, Northern Europe, the Arab region, Africa, and South America. Highly individualistic societies are in Western Europe, the United States, and Canada. Many societies in the world are hedonistic, hierarchical, and have preferences against gender egalitarianism.
Close enough for the argument at hand, I guess.
So, what we ought to do is often inconsistent with what we are doing.
Both of these are still based on human conceptions of morality, though, and again, they vary from person to person. Also, we're about a quarter of the way through her video now. I told you this was a complicated premise.
How do we know what we ought to do? How do we know it's right to help the needy, feed the poor, and act in a cooperative way?
How do we know what we ought to do? Again, that varies from person to person, and that's why we have ethics, and principles of least harm, empathy, and so on. This also answers the second part of the question. Societies founded on other principles tend to do things you and I would find ethically dubious, even though people in those societies think it is perfectly acceptable.
Evolutionary biologists have made observations to show that cooperative societies were better poised for survival, and over thousands of years in the distant past, groups have fared better than individuals.
Mind you, she just answered her own question without invoking any kind of theism. It's evolutionarily advantageous, and that's why we do it. Again, I agree, but she's the one who actually just, made this point. This can be answered without theism of any kind, or even religion in general. Arguably, this is why religions without a god like Buddhism, also came to similar conclusions, as most modern societies.
Yet even in historical times, we have examples of highly individualist and highly successful societies, such as those in ancient Greece and Rome. Cooperative societies over the past couple of thousand years have not necessarily been better positioned for survival.
Ancient Greco-Roman societies were not highly individualistic, though. At least not like we think of individualism today. Most ancient societies relied upon collectivism to form their armies, agriculture, education, public works, and so on. Conscription was a major factor in most ancient societies to these ends as well. In this case particularly, everyone who was able was expected to participate in society in this way, specifically to provide these services to themselves and those who were not able.
Because it has been shown that individualism is more beneficial in some ways. For example, a multitude of global studies have correlated gross domestic product with individualism.
I think she means GDP per capita, not raw GDP, but I would like sources. As a counterpoint, NASA is the United States program with the highest return on investment ever, and one of the very few to have a positive ROI. If it were not for our collectivism, we wouldn't have had this enormously successful endeavor, which acted as a force multiplier for that GDP in virtually every sector of commerce, including many sectors that other countries benefit from, basically free of charge. Fascinating, isn't it? Go ahead, explain to me how farming, transport, or any other major industry segment would be better off with a privately run GPS network that one person owns, instead of a free one we put up there and hand it out to, the information for free to everyone to use. You don't pay for the access to the GPS signals your phone uses to triangulate your location, and that's because of the collectivism inherent in our American society, one of the most individualistic nations in the history of man. What I'm saying is, every society ever is an amalgamation of the two, and this is an exercise in folly.
Individualism also corresponds with capitalism, innovation, and entrepreneurship.
See the previous point. We wouldn't have things like the internet without things like ARPA, and we wouldn't even have the phone or transistor without things like Bell Labs, which basically was a government monopoly at the time. We wouldn't even have the electric grid or our highway system without innovative collectivist things like the TVA or Federal Aid Road Act of 1916. Would our individualist society be more or less benefited by the lack of internet, electricity, radio, telephone, farm aid, and roads, do you think? Would we be more innovative if we were less connected and truly as individualistic as we were 150, 200 years ago? I think not. There's a reason most countries copied what we did, and that's because collectivism works just fine to facilitate individualism.
So why do even individualists know that we ought to help the weak, feed the poor, and be honest, just, empathetic, and loving?
That's the third part of your first question, and I think I answered it adequately. I'm arguing for the same reason you are. Because it benefits society, not because God tells me to.
Why is it that all societies, regardless of their practices, know what we ought to do?
That's the fourth part of your question. Of your first question. And again, the reasons are the principles of least harm, and the ethics that benefit society at large, and also because it's evolutionarily advantageous to do so. Again, you and I both just justified this without theism or religion.
Where do we get this moral compass?
Not to sound like a broken record, but it's things like the least harm and wanting to find a mate and wanting to have a nice place to live.
2.
Alright, let's hope this question isn't actually several different questions again.
What accounts for the empty tomb and the resurrection appearances of Jesus?
Well, you don't need a tomb for a guy who didn't die because he wasn't real, after all.
Roman pagans, Jews, and Christians in Jesus' time have all indicated that Jesus' empty tomb was found by second-class women.
3 things here. First, we don't have any indication outside of the Bible that it happened. So that appears to be a falsehood that she's no doubt read in some less than savory book. 2. I'm glad you reminded us that the morality of the Bible does in fact make women inferior to men. I must wonder, if you are my property, or a second-class citizen like livestock or whatever, then what makes you think all that stuff you set up in part 1 applies to you? Is this really the morality you think theism should be pushing by virtue of being in some old books? You do know that's got no internal logical consistency, right?
In fact, Paul stated that 500 people witnessed Jesus over the next 40 days after he rose from the dead.
Paul also said in 1 Timothy 14 that if a woman wants to ask questions, she should ask her husband at home, for it is disgraceful otherwise. Great morals you claim to have that you're violating. Just fantastic. Luckily, I'm not Paul. I'll let you break those biblical morals for the benefit of a society that engages in free speech.
Many biblical and extra-biblical sources have indicated that early Christians preached illegally for the first few hundred years in support of Jesus.
Sure, and you're also preaching in support of him right now. Did you meet him by chance, or are you just repeating something you heard like they did from a source that couldn't be confirmed?
They preached for decades, braving beatings, stoning, crucifixion, beheadings, and some were burned to death.
You know, that also happened to people who weren't Christians, right? Does that also mean that the people who were killed and tortured for centuries for saying Jesus wasn't real are also not lying? Huh. I guess I just don't understand what point you're trying to make.
3. If an atheist position is that the universe is the product of chance and necessity instead of the product of intelligence, how can he or she explain the fact that the universe is structured rationally, logically, and with mathematical precision and predictability?
Did you see my video on how rocks break? Let me break it down real simple. Rocks break along fault lines, and the broken pieces fit together perfectly. But no one designed them to break like that. Even though they fit perfectly together, and even though it appears they were designed independently to fit against one another, it doesn't mean someone designed the pieces of the rock to fit together. They just happen to break like that, just like the laws of physics. The video I discussed this in was called Natural Code.
Pope Benedict XVI said, "If nature is really structured with a mathematical language, and mathematics invented by man can manage to understand it, this demonstrates something extraordinary. The objective structure of the universe and the intellectual structure of the human being coincide."
That's what one great philosopher called adipity. Yes, we can understand our own languages that we use to describe things. That's kind of the point of language. It doesn't really help your point.
4. If atheists adhere to the belief that the purpose of human life is merely to procreate and survive, is it possible to determine that human life has any more value than animal life, since animals share the same basic purpose?
Value is a subjective term. Humans are more important to humans because we're humans. Every species feels this way. That's how kin selection works. There's an evolutionary pressure to keep alive things that you are the same species as. We happen to be smart enough to realize it, however, and that's one thing that makes us special. However, you're using purpose here in two different senses. The purpose of a hammer is to hit things, in the same way that the purpose of sex is to create new offspring. However, I can use a hammer for other things and give it new purpose. This does not mean, however, that there is some God using me for something other than what I am already doing, or what I happened to evolve to do. Evolution can explain why sexual sterility exists, but in the Bible, the only time someone is sterile is so God can cause them to not be sterile anymore. What does that say about the way your God treats people who want children but are literally incapable of having them? Is God's purpose for them to suffer? What exactly is ethical or moral about that?
5. Why have so many atheists determined that the life of a fetus in the mother's womb is less valuable than the life of his or her mother?
Also, why have so many not done that? Also, why does the Bible say that humans have different values, literally in Exodus and Leviticus no less, based on age or race?
What standard do they use to value human life?
Well, we don't use the one that says I can purchase you as a slave for about 60% of what I'd have to pay for your husband after all, in Leviticus 27. Exodus 21, for example, shows us how women are only as important to the men whom they are attached. In fact, even the Bible discusses how a fetus is worth more than the woman it's in Exodus 21, verse 22 to 25, such that if you hit a pregnant woman and the child is not harmed, then you're fine. But if you harm the child, you can be killed. Wonder why God has that in his morality. Also, this is another of those verses about responding in kind. Remember the golden rule?
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the fact you stopped by.
What about the fact that many of us responded to you? Anyway, that's the end of her video, so that's the end of mine. If you enjoyed this, please click that like button. Don't forget to subscribe so you can see more content just like this. Leave a comment down below. Let me know your thoughts. Share this video to all your friends, enemies, lovers, haters, and whomever else you want to see it. And as always, this has been Reverend JR, signing off.